So I borrowed a friend's smoker, which honestly should have been my very first warning sign because I had never smoked anything before my entire life. Not like briskets, no ribs, absolutely nothing. But suddenly I'd watched like 14 hours of YouTube videos and now I believed I was a pitmaster. I was Googling stuff like Texas brisket secrets and how to get bark and what's the best pellet blend. At one point, I was actually asking ChatGPT brisket questions, like I was preparing for open heart surgery. And I didn't just plan dinner, no. I had an entire brisket future planned, like brisket sandwiches, brisket chili, brisket sliders, brisket nachos. This brisket was gonna carry my family emotionally and nutritionally through an entire week. I had everything, like the butcher paper, beef stock, thermometers, spice blends. I even bought one of those giant injection needles, to inject the brisket with liquid, like I was performing some sort of backyard meat Botox. That's when middle age gets dangerous because now we have disposable income and probably too much confidence, which is usually a terrible combination. And the confidence I had going into this, it was sky high. I'm like, dude, this thing's gonna like totally change your life. Like, you have never had brisket like this. It's like low and slow. And suddenly I'm talking like a divorced guy named Gord with a barbecue smoker YouTube channel. And then at about midnight, I'm outside in the dark with a flashlight, lifting the smoker lid every 9 minutes, like somehow staring at the meat would somehow speed things up, checking the thermometer constantly, tapping them when the number didn't move in the right way. Like, no, this can't be right. I'm holding a beer and I'm watching the smoke roll through the backyard and I'm thinking, man, now I get it. Like some sort of ancient middle-aged brotherhood of suburban meat elders, I'd walked away from that tender brisket convinced my family would gather around the table the next morning and I would be some sort of suburban protein god. And then at about 7 in the morning, I literally pounced out of bed like a kid on Christmas morning, ran into the backyard, ready to finally unveil my glorious brisket. And the smoker was dead, absolutely cold, nothing but silence. And I just stood there in my pajama pants, staring at this giant, sad meat log, like someone had unplugged it from life support. And honestly, I realized something from that experience, that men over 40 suddenly become obsessed with grilling because, it just becomes a midlife hobby that we can all disappear to, When you're younger, you don't really have time. Your kids are little, you're exhausted, you're just trying to survive. And honestly, in your 20s, you're not really any better. Grilling is just hamburgers and hot dogs, and that's really it. Maybe a burnt sausage or two if you're really feeling ambitious. Then you mature a little bit, and now it's chicken, and you have fish on cedar planks, and you start believing that you've evolved. And then somewhere in your 40s, something happens and you suddenly believe you can conquer meat itself. And now it's on to briskets and tomahawk steaks and beef ribs the size of canoe paddles because middle-aged men become deeply committed to impressing people through smoked protein. And every guy over 40 eventually becomes the exact same person. You own 3 thermometers, those black grilling gloves, you have the smoker the size of a Honda Civic, and an apron with those really embarrassing puns on it like Smoke Daddy and Grill Sergeant. Like somehow fire just turned us into barbecue comedians. And every guy over 40 develops the exact same grilling stance, feet apart and your hands are on your hips and you have that tiny nod and you're looking at the barbecue like, yep, there's some good bark on that. Hey, that's nice smoke. And then you look at them like, Mark, dude, you're just like heating sausages. Relax, man. But the funniest thing we become completely obsessed with just the meat. And that's really all we think about. Never once do sides ever enter our brain. The family comes over and they're like, where's the salad? What are we gonna have with this? And it's the same response, nothing. There are no sides. The side dish is just witnessing the meat. And that's really the whole entire evening. We had spent 19 straight hours emotionally bonding with a brisket. And you think we're actually gonna make potatoes? No, absolutely not. Meanwhile, our wives are outside quietly saving the entire meal. They're making salads, vegetables, pasta salad, cornbread, because left alone, middle-aged men would serve one giant tray of meat and probably 6 IPAs. And somehow we still walk in carrying ribs like we're some sort of returning war heroes. I don't know. Guys our age, we don't even really hang out properly anymore. We say things like, we should go grab a beer sometime. And we say that for like 6 straight years. But grilling gives guys a reason to slow down together without really making it weird. And you stand beside another guy, you look into the fire, you talk about charcoal and pellet blends for like 90 minutes. And somehow it counts as an emotional connection. And then we even start telling barbecue stories, not cooking stories, they're barbecue stories, like war veterans, the brisket stalled at 165 and oh, I lost the fire around 2 a.m. Oh, I had to wrap it early. Oh, the rain was coming in sideways. We tell these stories like we survived like a campaign overseas. Every middle-aged guy starts with one of these legendary victories and usually one of these devastating meat failures. And honestly, that's kind of the point of this channel too. Just weird little midlife things like this, the stuff we suddenly care deeply about for absolutely no reason, trying new hobbies, laughing at ourselves, sitting outside with a cold beer while something slowly cooks in the background. So if this sounds familiar, subscribe. You're probably already one of us anyways. Now, somewhere along the way, you stop needing everything to be impressive. And that was the weird thing about my little brisket disaster. After all the prep, all the confidence, all the, this is gonna change your life kind of energy, I scrapped it. I made ribs instead. And you know what? They were good. They weren't legendary, they weren't life-changing, they were just ribs, cold beer, sunny afternoon, family around, music playing. And I think that's what eventually happens in midlife. You realize maybe the point isn't becoming a grill master, maybe it's just having an excuse to slow down a little, stand outside, laugh at yourself, and spend time with people you love while the smoke rolls through the backyard, even if the brisket dies.